Yo, what's good, everybody? In today's video, let's talk about why or how performance isn't always a fixed number. People tend to think that performance usually it's like peak, to where like you bought, let's say, 7800X3D processor, and you're supposed to always get peak performance. Like if it says that it's gonna give you 5 gigahertz all throughout, people tend to think that all 5 gigahertz are supposed to be all throughout the lifespan of the product, which is technically true, but also not true. As remember, as time passes, software evolves, and as it evolves, it adds more things to that your processor has to do. Things that it needs to decode, things that it needs to process in the background. That's why I started recommending people that the sweet spot for gaming, it's an 8 core. Why? Because that way it gives you more breathing room to have more things running that the operating system needs to be able to run at, let's say, peak, what people consider peak. But remember that it's not always that factor, because remember that heat, humidity, care of the product also tend to play a lot into the lifespan and the performance of said device. Especially like with SSD, I tend to recommend people to keep them between 0 and like around 75% full. Why? Because that way it gives you like enough breathing room to where it'll perform at its peak, or what people consider peak. But if you keep them 80%, 85%, 90%, even 100% full or close to 100% full, it'll slow you down. Why? Because they are not meant to be almost 100% full. They always need a little breathing room so they can keep their performance. Because remember that there's a lot of files that you move, a lot of things that come and go in your operating system, a lot of things that you uninstall, things that might leave residue in your system and stuff like that. So that's why I recommend people to keep it at least at a 75% full capacity. Everything else, I tend to tell people, if you're gonna run your computer, try to, in the winter specifically, try to have ventilation and have airflow in where you're gonna be. Because remember that, sure, you can have your computer turned on and have the heater, but remember that the heating rises, so therefore it'll keep your computer hotter than it needs to be. So that's why I recommend people have a airflow in the area where you keep your computer, especially in the winter months where everybody tends to run an AC, not an AC, but a heater. And in the summer, try to keep it as cool as possible, because remember, the summer heat plus the being encapsulated in a room plus being encapsulated the components in a case, it's gonna get hot. So try to keep it as comfortable as possible. And if AMD says that the peak performance of it could be run up until, let's say, 95%, I always try to keep people run it as cool as you could possibly get, because that way it'll give you a longer lifespan, and it'll give you a longer lifespan of the boost table of the components. Because not only when you run it hot, it runs slower, therefore it degrades the life of the chip itself. So the cooler you can run it, the longer it'll be able to sustain those boost speeds. So I always try to run it at least maybe 5 to 10 degrees cooler than it should be, or that you could have it, because that way it'll help you out in the long run, and it'll give you the performance that you expect from the said device longer. Another thing is that as you update, especially for Windows, as you update your operating system, it tends to bring things that it wasn't accounted for at the time that you bought your computer or your computer parts or whatever. So therefore, it has to run some other things, especially if you have a lot of things running like OBS, Discord, Spotify, your web browser, especially whatever it is that you have that it's a startup when you turn on your computer. So that's, keeping the processor working hard. And also if it's undercooled, or if it's running warmer than it should, or that you tend to have it and it's running more things, it's giving a lot more effort than it should. Therefore, it's slowly chipping away the lifespan of the component. And that goes for RAM, SSDs, your CPU, your graphics card. So always try to keep it at peak performance, and also try to keep your computer fans at as tip top and flawless and clean as possible. That way it could give you the best airflow that you could get for your computer. Another thing that people don't tend to think is that, like I said, heat is the enemy of performance. So if your cell phone or your tablet or your computer or whatever it is that your device is that uses a chip, a processor, a CPU, whatever you want to call it, it's running hotter than it tends to be, and then the manufacturer rated capacity, then it's gonna chip away, like I said, and it's gonna eat into your CPU's life and lifespan. So always, heat is the number one enemy of your computer, as well as dust. Heat and dust are the number one enemies of state, and when it comes to your computer or your electronics. So always try to keep them tip top performance. Another thing is that software is literally the invisible killer of performance. Because remember, for Windows, they usually tend to test a lot of things that you may not see in the beginning, but when it tends to happen is that whenever you get an update or whatever, they usually introduce things that that weren't there before, like AI running in the background or the Copilot thing that's happening or whatever. So yeah, try to tame your expectations as software progresses, because software is another enemy killer for your computer parts. Another thing is background activities. Also, the more things you have running in the background, the harder your CPU tends to work. And especially if you're running a game and you're running apps in the background like Discord, music things like Spotify, or your web browser, or you're also doing research as well as playing a game, and you're also recording and stuff like that. So that's eating into your performance budget. So therefore, if your computer is supposed to run a peak at 100% and you're asking it to go 150 or 200%, then of course something's got to give along the line. Another thing is that performance tends to be how clean of a person you are within your operating system. So depending how many files you keep, how many music, videos, photos, and stuff like that you keep in your computer, that also bugs down your computer, because your SSD has to work harder, and then the performance on your CPU tanks, because the CPU has to provide help, in this case, to the SSD and stuff like that. So, and if your GPU hasn't been clean in like 5+ years and it's running a little harder than it was when you first got it, then that also eats into your performance of your games and stuff like that. So like I said, always try to keep your computer and your devices as clean as possible, as neatly as possible. Try to maybe, I don't know, every 2 months or stuff like that, do a deep clean on your devices, the ports, dust it off a little bit, spray compressed air if you can, and stuff like that, so that it also keeps the performance at its peak, or how you ask it to be. Another thing is people tend to leave their computers on, and like I said in a previous episode, in a previous video, there usually tends to get small errors in your memory, and if you have everything cached in your memory, it's gonna give you a little bit of performance tank. So try to keep, if you're gonna use your computer, let's say my computer's been running for I think like 3 or 4 days. If I wanted to actually keep my performance high, as high as I can, what I would do is just restart it and then reopen everything that I had open before. And that way my computer feels much more better than it used to. Because like I said, you might get an error here and there that it keeps cache into your memory, because remember that everything you leave open is cached into memory. That way you can access it as fast as possible. That's why you can't really compare SSD cache to memory cache, because memory will always be faster than SSD caching, no matter how fast your SSD is. And again, guys, this is gonna be it for this week's episode. It's just a little maintenance episode that I wanted to do for you guys, so you guys can keep your computer and your devices feeling as top notch as possible and as peak performance as possible for as long as you can keep your device. And also, don't be one of those people that, for electronics, if you don't need this specific device or whatever, just trade it in for a new one. Don't be like, oh no, I'm gonna keep it and I'm gonna buy a brand new one or whatever, because then all you're doing is being worse for the environment, because this is a phone that some other people, some other person could use that is going to be beneficial to them. Again, guys, this is going to be it for today's video and for this week's episode. Anything else that you feel like you need to contribute to this topic, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know if you like it by giving me a like and a thumbs up, a like, however you want to call it. Leave me comments, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.